So we've got 15 minutes left for a discussion. As I said, please do kind of pop any questions into the chat. We've got a kind of Lucy who's dropped a comment in saying, hey, key takeaway would be that we need to have solidarity and connections across our community, social enterprise and support sector, which COVID Zoom seems to be helping. And I think that's a good it's a good point. Obviously, you know, with the past, you know, so much of the kind of work we do in communities, as we've said, is about kind of gathering people and giving people the space to be able to come together and a kind of a good welcome to people. How have we done that over, or how have you done that within your projects over the past year? Because obviously we've faced challenges. We mentioned obviously we're all on Zoom today. Has there been much kind of online discussions? Have people in your communities been up for that? Because I'll throw that out generally to the group.
I can just say that we haven't really used Zoom at all, other than for team and board meetings. But yeah, I'd say a lot more of our contact is still happening, like in the doorway, on the telephone. So not really in our case, but.
Yeah, I think that's the same for us. So we set up free Wi-Fi on the street through all our buildings, and had a system of repurposing devices to get devices to families that needed them. But in terms of our kind of local interaction, not at all. But in terms of nationally and kind of recognising our collective power as community businesses, I think it's really working, and sort of sharing ways that we can do that more creatively is hopefully something that will continue.
Yeah, I agree, Hannah. That's kind of what I meant there, because we don't use Zoom with our community or project at all. But through the last year, we've had contact with community businesses across the country and the world, and that has been really valuable. And I feel like there's a critical mass of energy and possibility that's building, and we're kind of realizing our power in, you know, in our togetherness, in our solidarity. So that's been big, I think, this year.
I think there's also something about reducing the barriers for each other as well. Do you know what I mean? It's like, just because some of us have find it hard, it doesn't mean that the people coming through with ideas now should also find it hard. So we kind of have a collective responsibility to try and figure that out and advocate for some of that change that could help others come through.
Yeah.
Has anyone found ways to kind of connect that? Because that's definitely been something that I've experienced in the past year, you know, kind of being able to connect with people kind of nationally and internationally, you know, and that kind of sense of solidarity. But has anyone been able to kind of extend that out to in any interesting ways to their members, or kind of people within the organisations? Is that something that members have shown an interest in? Is that something that they would find empowering too, do we think?
Well, our board has, certainly. So in terms of kind of accessing a broader network that they wouldn't have necessarily experienced before, you know, just in terms of needing to travel and stuff like that. So I think they've really benefited in terms of sort of developing their skills and things like that. But also how we connect other people, and so people that are like in our buildings that are trying to get something off the ground, it's much easier to be able to connect them to other similar organisations.
Andrew, question? Oh, sorry, go for it, Sarah.
No, I was just going to say, we've been trying to keep our Wednesday meetings going, but it is very hard to get people to come. We have to sort of like send them an SMS message as well, saying, look, don't forget it's Wednesday, don't forget to come, sort of thing. And then they come and they're really glad they did. But it's not something that it's not easy to make them prioritize it. And we also find that it's the older people rather than the younger people that do come. The young ones seem to be sort of busy doing something else, or they don't see it as something to invest in. My day job on Ashoka now, we've been teaching a course on systems change for really quite advanced levels of social entrepreneurship, and that's been fantastic because we bring in people from all over the world and really exchange. Very inspirational. But now you've got me thinking we should be doing it far more for the local community as well. So I will try and improve my ways.
I want to bring in Paul. Paul, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? Paul Kelly.
Yeah, sure. Hello. Good morning. It's sunny in Liverpool. Yeah, great session. Really great energy and fantastic. I suppose for me, the question that I sort of threw in the chat was how, I'm really interested in the scale and how you scale these things up, but also how you create that synergy between individual businesses. And particularly here in Liverpool, we've faced hurdles with that in actually people, when you get a lot of focus on projects and they get a lot of attention and a lot of investment, that creates kind of a different climate, I guess. And sometimes it's hard for groups to create that collective vision. I'm just interested in if you've faced some of that. Egos get in the way of this.
Yeah. If I could answer, first of all, on the scaling one, I think, we talk about replication rather than scaling. And I think that's been part of our issue is everybody wants us to scale as a Toyen, out, but we're saying, no, you can replicate if you want to. And it might look something very different in Stavanger, where it's now been set up. And it does look very different. And they're funding it just from the public sector side of things, whereas we're not. And so there's difference. But at the same time, it's the social contract that we try and keep the same. So it's all those social things that we're saying, and the relationships and the feeling and the atmosphere and all that that's important to replicate rather than the organization itself. And now we're looking at a sort of umbrella organization of a national network of community incubators, so that we can all come in and share our knowledge, but we're all working independently within that. On terms of the synergy, I think what they've done in Participatory City, the learnings from there have been fantastic. And there was a paper just a few days ago by Tessie Britton, who leads that, about this sort of community branding. And it's a horrid word to use, but at the same time, if there's a sort of way of keeping their independence, but seeing that they're part of a whole, how can you make sure that people are seeing that it's not a competition, this is about making collective impact? And that also comes down to leadership. But leadership must also be saying, you're all working together, and we're not going to start sort of expressing that this person's fantastic. We're going to say that this is part of a whole. So it's all the communication of the whole, and this whole sort of co-creative collective leadership, systems leadership. I think that was one of the points, is that there's a whole new kind of leadership of weaving things together that's coming out there, and there's so many resources. And I so believe we need the leaders to come in and set the scene that this is a vision for the community rather than a vision for one or two things to become the unicorns of our future community. So yeah, lots of things you can do, but it's tough.
I mean, if I understood that your question correctly, Paul, I guess, and just in this context, it's, I guess I often think that like the Launderette wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Homebaked, CLT and the bakery. But I also think it was important that we were, although we got loads of support from the organisation and many people involved, it's important that we are a separate and distinct organisation and project. And so I guess I think that's, that's more that thing about, I forgot the words that people used. It's not expanding, it's reproducing or something. I forgot what someone said.
Replicating.
Yeah, it's kind of like, looking at that model of a social enterprise and thinking what else on the high street could meet other needs and function in a similar way, but it's not in competition, and our success is their success, theirs is ours. I guess it's creating that kind of like network of things. But I guess also on the competition thing, for me, that's one of the things that I think is really notable about social enterprise, is also that the more you are self-sustaining through your own generated income, you are in less competition for grants and external finance, and it actually allows you to collaborate better than if, unfortunately, because of the often decreasing pots of grant funding, you know, it forces people who should be collaborating into positions of competition. And I feel like social enterprise is kind of a bit of a liberation from that, or it's at least like a movement towards that.
Yeah, I think in a similar way, it's like we talk about the fact that there's space for everyone on the street, and so it's like that there's strength in that from a customer's point of view and a sort of experiential point of view. But the other thing that we talk about is how we lift others as we climb. So being really conscious that it's better to climb more slowly and enable others to kind of come around than for like one thing to be amazing and everything else to be kind of left behind. So I think it's kind of how you do that really consciously is important as well. We can be generous.
I'm going to bring in a comment that Neil's made. He says, because I think it speaks to the point that Paul made, and we're coming towards the end of it, I'm really sorry, but I think, so Neil says, my reflection is that we need to focus on developing models and ways for the communities to co-own assets, buildings important to their neighbourhood. Can we create grassroots finance, social-oriented capital to create alternatives to traditional ways? And I just wanted to highlight as a sort of, because I know that also speaks to what Hannah speaks about and thinks about a lot. And I just wanted to highlight that I think what this Zoom culture has brought is, for example, that we were invited to a discussion where Nudge were presenting their ideas or their proposals of thinking like, how can we sort of, you know, have more assets, and how can we maybe nearly land bank in a community way, you know, how can we hold on to land and sort of going ahead to trying that, so we can learn from them. So I think it's sometimes really, and then in that conversation was also, for example, Jess Steele, who's going to join us later on in the conversation around homes and other community assets, where we were starting to think like, you know, is there a way that we can pull across the different organization? Is there a way, you know, that we can pool our finances, can loan to each other, can help each other in that way, which is not a new idea, of course, and it has happened in the co-op movement. And we also talked last week a bit about how in the Liverpool co-op movement, for example, and in the UK co-op movement, there's a lot of money actually there that we need to kind of think about how we can act as investors and act as guarantees to kind of support these systems. So that's kind of traveling into the wider questions around system making. I don't know, Hannah, if you want to say something like as a last sort of comment on that. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's about how we present ourselves to that investor kind of community, I guess, and Jess is doing a lot of work on that as well, and it comes back to that sort of collective way of presenting ourselves as well. It's like together we own a lot of assets, you know, and so it's like how we add that up to have a greater voice and to be seen as a more credible option for investors. But I think also it's you know, someone's put in the chat about the cost of social finance and things like that. So it's about talking about our risk and you know, recognizing that we are really, really good investments on lots of levels. And I think certainly, you know, post-COVID, people are going to be more conscious about that, about investing socially and stuff like that. So it's kind of how we maneuver that, because we've talked a lot in terms of community shares. It's like rather than us having to explain what community shares are and build up the kind of community that is looking to invest in community shares, can we do that sort of more strategically, so that as each person kind of comes forward with their share offer, we know that there's a whole wealth of people that are looking to that as an option. And it's things like that that I think we can do more effectively to kind of create an easier environment for individual projects?
Yeah, like if we had like a version of Sarah's incubator or incubators across different communities, and that was linked to community share offers or investments, you know, the way we do, like there's various DIY things where you pay like £2 a week or whatever. They've all popped up during COVID, haven't they? And you pay to, like I pay to an arts one, and we can nominate artists to get a £500 grant. So if you did the same and people donated to a community ideas to the incubator, you know, you've got some seed funding there as well, which we're collectively in control of. And I think people would have been interested before COVID, but I think now it's just changed things, hasn't it, for a lot of people.
As well, I hate to be the person to cut a really good conversation short, but that is us on time. And I know the guys have got another session to prepare for. So I just want to say a really big thank you to Sarah, Grace, and Hannah for coming to share your stories. That was great. That was really, really inspiring. A lot of ideas. I know certainly our members of Homebaked have got a lot of food for thought there. So thank you very much, and thank you everyone for taking part and posting your questions, and you know, thanks for joining us on a Saturday, on a sunny Saturday morning if you're here in Liverpool. We really appreciate your time and participation.